Welcome to Gallery News and Reviews. I'm Linda Milrod and I'm the director of the Dalhousie Art Gallery. Right now at the Art Gallery we're exhibiting the 5th Dalhousie Drawing Exhibition, an annual event where an artist is invited to select the other artists and the work to be included. This year Tim Whiten, a teacher at York University in Toronto and an artist in his own right, was invited to perform that role. He was in town the first week of April to install the exhibition, and Jemmy Kelly, on staff at the Dalhousie Art Gallery, interviewed him for Gallery News and Reviews.
Tim, you're the guest curator of this exhibition, which means that besides having work in the show yourself, you also invited the other participants to show their work. And I was wondering if you could just tell us who the other artists are and maybe talk a little bit about their work.
Okay. There are 6 artists, including myself, represented in this show. Maxwell Bates, Vera Frankel, Andre Jodoin, Susie Lake, and Carmen Marozzo are the artists whose work you will see as you move around the gallery. Each artist is dealing with things in their own way. Each works that has been done have been approached honestly and with some sincerity, I think. And I think that they open up for people if people are responsible and go after it. Interesting to note that Maxwell Bates is the elder of all of the artists present, and has been working for quite a number of years, not received very much acclaim, but has been quietly working and doing what he felt was necessary. And as you move through the show and you see the works by Maxwell Bates, I think it would be fairly clear that there's a very mature artist working through a lot of concerns and a lot of interests in a very direct visual and sensory way, internal sensory way, and I think that would be pretty exciting to see. On the other hand, you find Vera Frankel working in a very different kind of way, using storytelling as a device, as an artifice, setting up and arranging real-life issues, real-life concerns, and hopefully reflecting the kind of concerns that people find however they function and wherever they function. After that, you find, I believe, a real solid kind of concern by Andre Jodoin, who is actually dealing with consciousness, reflecting consciousness, and a kind of phenomenological concern that is amplified in the way that he processes the work and in the way that people come through the work. And Susie Lake, who is really exciting in the way that she approaches her work, deals with a kind of response to self, a kind of concern for identity. And she works a lot with transformations, translations, and imagery, which is somewhat foreign to some people in regards to drawing, but I think it will help to open up people's understanding about what drawing might be or could be.
This is actually a Susie Lake behind us,
yes,
right?
This is Mephisto Waltz, one of the most recent works that Susie Lake has done, and I think it's quite exciting. I think people will find it revealing and interesting and intriguing once they get an opportunity to experience it.
What about Carmen's work?
Yeah, Carmen's work is really quite exciting in a very different way. Carmen approaches things, in a sense, from an archetypal and mythic way, and underneath it is a quite intensive study of both archetype, mysticism, and personal reference. So I think it's a very highly complex set of symbols and imageries to be able to reveal a concern for his interest in the world and the world that he lives in. They are, at first sight, seemingly somewhat cryptic, but I think as they are experienced, people find that the work opens up pretty readily.
It's very personal work, but it does seem that it's accessible if you're willing to give it a certain amount of time.
Sure, personal, but still at the same time impersonal.
Right.
Which I think, in a sense, is very much about the nature of all of the works in this exhibition. They are both personal and they are also impersonal.
Right. Well, that sort of leads me to ask you, I know you don't like the word thematic in terms of this group show.
No.
But obviously when you were thinking about putting it together, you were making connections with artists and with their work. Maybe you could just say something about those sorts of connections that were going through your mind.
Yeah, the exhibition is not a thematic one, at least not in the normal sense of the word. I went about looking at artists and tried to look at the work that the artists had been doing to see what it was that they were trying to get at. And I chose first the artist, not the work. And then I went in to look more specifically at the kind of work that has been done by each individual, and found that somehow things were connected. They approach things completely differently in many cases, but it seems as if they come down to the same point. I think that will also be understandable when the catalog is seen and that people get an opportunity to move through the catalog. There are statements by the artists there, statements which amplify their intentions and talk about the way that they work. They don't talk always specifically about a particular work, but they talk about the way in which they work. And I think it's very revealing as you start to read and respond to that writing by each individual, and you start to put it together and see that they're really not so separate at all. They're really going after the same goodies, even though they approach it in different ways.
Yeah, the thing that strikes me is that though the work actually looks quite different from one artist to the other, of course, that there seems to be a concern with the self in almost all of the work, and that seems to be borne out by the statements in the catalog.
Sure, but again, as we mentioned, as you were talking about before, it's not just a personal self, it is also an impersonal self. And I think in a sense, the idea of self-consciousness comes forward in this exhibition. Self-consciousness in the sense that for an individual who's working through creative work, you start to examine self. And in some cases, if you examine closely enough, you find that there are certain aspects of self which connect up to other people. And in that way, I think what is revealed is a clear insight about how we all are.
Right.
And that in some cases, can be considered self-consciousness. Self-consciousness about the nature of what we all are, the morphologies being the same, the issues that we have to confront being the same. We may approach them in slightly different ways, but it really comes down to about the same thing.
Right.
There's a wide variety in it.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that I'd like to ask you about the show in general is that I think that this is clearly going to challenge, shake up people's ideas about drawing, and I think that that's intentional, that's something that you want to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word shake up so much as I would say to confront people. I think that the problems that we face continually in regard to art is that there are always boundaries that have been set up, and previous boundaries become stationary to the point where no one is willing to consider beyond those boundaries. I think naturally boundaries grow up because things happen, but we don't necessarily have to always use those boundaries. We can also find new boundaries. It's interesting that definitions are essentially boundaries.
Yes.
And as definitions change, they change as regard to people looking at things differently. So I hope that people will be confronted by the exhibition, that their boundary thoughts might be confronted by the exhibition, and that they will be given an opportunity to look afresh at the whole idea of what drawing is or what it can be.
Yeah.
Because nothing is just what it was. It's a potential of something more, too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the exciting things about the show, actually, is that people maybe can go through that kind of exploration when they move around the works.
Oh, sure.
And think about those kinds of things.
Well,
Yeah.
you find that there's a wide range of media used here, all the way from acrylic paint to photographs to wall paint,
Yes.
and to audio tape. And I think that the variety of those different media provides some excitement. And that excitement really is not only in this exhibition, I think it really is across North America and across the world right now in regard to what art can do and what it often decides or chooses to do rather than what it used to do.
Yeah.
It does the same things again, but it also does more, actually. And those are interesting thoughts to consider.
Okay, well, maybe we could talk a little bit about your work in the show.
Okay.
One of the pieces that you've got is a piece called Arc,
Yes.
which you like to call a ritual. And maybe you could sort of explain a little bit about how it goes and what your intentions are
Yeah.
with that work.
Well, the piece entitled Arc will be a combination of two elements, basically. There's the ritual element, which is the acting out or the doing, which is intended to help to reveal certain concerns, certain issues that people may have had in their awareness, but hopefully to bring those issues more forward in their consciousness. That element is an active and living element that is done at the time that people are available to see and to be available to. The other portion, which is the residues from ritual, are the physical components. And the physical components are really a kind of constructed symbol structure to hopefully reveal some of these things that people can respond to in the actual working through of the quote ritual activity. The title of the piece is a kind of nice cryptic title. Hopefully people will get an opportunity to explore that, and I hope by their attendance at the opening they will get some clues as to how to approach it. Nevertheless, whether they're available for the opening or not, I think all the clues are still in place.
With the residue that's left.
Yes, with the residue. And if they are interested in pursuing it, I think they will be able to find very clearly what the work is really about, and they will really experience the work. And I think that that word experience is very important. There are a lot of ways to deal with work. Sometimes one can gather information, theoretic information about it, and that's one part. But I think it's very important for people to literally experience the work, to know really what has taken place. And then they can take a reflective posture too afterwards and figure out where it was that they were and what it was that they experienced. And I think that the work in some cases challenges people to do that.
Yeah,
it won't reveal itself only on one level.
Yeah, right. And I understand that in terms of your part in this as making the work and performing the ritual, that experience is important, that the work that you do is part of your experience, part of your kind of development.
Sure.
And you see that as a real kind of central thing for yourself too. So
yeah, it's I think an ongoing thing. Making a work is literally growing, experiencing fresh and new things, experiencing old things all over again. And I think it's quite exciting continually to be involved in the process of making work. And notice I don't refer to my own work as art, I refer to it as work only, because it connects up to not only the making process, but I think the thinking process which generates the work is also very important. So when the work comes into physical manifestation, I think there's a kind of culmination of both the thinking and the doing into one unit, and I think that everything is pointed towards that, and then hence the ritual aspect, which can be revelatory and which can open other people up perhaps to new and different experiences, as well as seeing old experiences all over again.
So you're not really too concerned if people understand immediately the symbology or the absolute true meaning of a thing, as long as they just experience it, deal with it, and maybe think about it a little bit.
I think that's primary, because it's important that they get an opportunity to confront the work and have the work confront them. The first stage of their own involvement with the work is their experience. I'm not as concerned about people's definite cognitive awareness about all the symbols or whatever. It is important that they be attendant to that work so that everything comes in on the first level. And then if they choose to be reflective about it and want to pursue it in a cognitive fashion, they can.
Right.
That's another face of the work, perhaps, if you want. But both are necessary, and I think both are available. I'm not trying to send people up blind alleys. I try and put it there, and if they pursue it, then they find out what is there, for sure. And that doesn't mean over a period of an hour or 2 hours or a week either. Sometimes it might take a year to process the information, or to choose to process the information in a reflective way. And I think that in a sense that way the work lives. It lives through people and with their experiences rather than being separate from them and something that they come to and then they leave.
Well, you tell a story about a show that you had where right in the front doorway was a wicker basket of skulls, and maybe you could finish that story.
Well, yeah, I told this to some people the other day as a result of doing a workshop at the college, and I was saying that the works do affect people, and sometimes if you're standing near enough to see the responses, you can recognize signs of the effect. And the statement was regarding a work that was shown in Toronto, which was a wicker basket painted white, and it contained 50 human skulls. It was positioned directly in front of the door, so it was the first piece that you encountered when coming into the space. And I happened to be there on one Sunday afternoon when an individual came to the door, stepped partially through the portal, looked at the wicker basket, recognized that there were human skulls in it. He closed the door, turned around, and went away. And the expression on his face, I think, was really easily readable. When he walked through the door, he was immediately confronted with his cultural values, his interest in his own culture, and what he held as beliefs and thoughts seemed to be revealed. So I thought it was pretty important, and it was important for me to be able to see that. It was an immediate kind of feedback. That immediate feedback doesn't always occur. Sometimes it takes much longer. But that was one chance, one opportunity for it to happen immediately, that's all.
I thought what was interesting about that story was that you were able to incorporate that response into what you felt the work could allow for, that you weren't necessarily feeling that that was negative or that that was a bad thing, that the fact that he reacted to it and that maybe at some later time maybe dealt with that was good enough for you. And I thought that that was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I'm not concerned about certain kinds of responses. I am concerned about certain kinds of responses, but I'm also concerned about the additional responses which I can't pattern. Much of those responses are cultural and need to be viewed and reflected upon by us. Things and works which allow us to do that, I think, are substantial. And it takes a while sometimes for us to accept and recognize that. It took me a long while to recognize that people responded to the work in a lot of different ways. But as much as I could pattern a kind of intention there so that at least from that there were certain kinds of issues that would fall into place. And that's the control, to some degree, of the intention of the work. And I feel it's important somehow.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, my particular favorite piece of yours in the show is a drawing called Heart. And it's a work on paper that you've made with lemon juice. And I think what's interesting about that drawing for me is that in a kind of a funny way it ties in with other things that you're interested in terms of life and death, that this drawing really does have a life.
Oh, yeah.
Could you explain how it is that it does have a life?
Well, that particular work is kind of like, well, it is essentially a yantra, Western yantra, and it is connected up with that whole mandalic tradition, but from a Western point of view. And like there are a lot of different hearts there, but if you say the word heart, 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 very often you find that really you're saying art. And so that in itself becomes a real connection. And I think to respond to the work in that way really opens up a lot of different possibilities. And historically, the reference to heart was the seat of life, the seat of love. And essentially it is still a very real biologic seat of life, because it's the mechanism which pumps the blood and affects us in very, very real ways in the sense of the human physiology. So that the work does function on a lot of different levels. And it's a visual work, it's a symbolic work, it's a spiritual work, it's
also a very
work.
physical work, because it has a death as well, and that the lemon juice and the activity of that, maybe you could elaborate on
it's
how
good
that...
that you mentioned that, because that's an exciting portion of the work for me. The work that we're talking about uses lemon juice as one of the elements of the process. And when the lemon juice is first applied, it's difficult to see it. So I work under a very intense light so I can tell where it is that I've been on the sheet of paper. As the ultraviolet rays affect that juice, it turns darker and darker and darker, so that in that process you start to recognize that the drawing literally has a life based upon the kind of chemical change of the elements used in it. As the lemon juice gets darker, the work becomes more visible. The areas in which I've worked with a brush with the lemon juice become very definite, more definite all the time, to the point where as it is processed to its, I guess, pinnacle, then it starts to diminish. It goes down the other end or down the other hill, and it starts to affect and activate the paper in a different way too, so that it not only is a material which is affected by ultraviolet rays, it affects the material which it sits on too. And I think that that whole chemical process is in a way really very much a kind of analog of life.
And so the painting or the drawing will eventually destroy itself.
More than likely,
will eventually eat the paper.
Sure, it'll self-destruct unless acted upon by some other force.
Yeah, some kind of archival process will have to take place to preserve that.
To preserve it, that's true.
Right.
And in a sense, that's a kind of interruption, but it sometimes becomes a necessary thing to do to keep that from happening for record, for tradition, or whatever.
Tim, one of the other drawings in the show that you've done that I think is kind of interesting is one called Middle Space. Now, we first referred to that as a black drawing, and there's obviously a lot more going on than just a black drawing.
That's true. First of all, the drawing isn't black, although people refer to it as such. It's the work is accomplished by using jellied graphite.
How do you mean jellied graphite?
Well, it's graphite in a jellied medium. In fact, it is the same kind of material that's used in universal joints for cars. It is used as a lubricant, really, and packing. So what I've done in that instance is gone and found jellied graphite in a container and put it on to masonite. And it's interesting the process that occurs with this too. The jelly graphite has to be warmed up very much as you warm up ink when you get ready to print it in an etching process or a lithographic process. So that the jelly graphite is warmed up and applied to masonite with a roller. And so what it does is form a very thin skin over top of the masonite. And then after that occurs, it is allowed to dry, and then it's polished using abrasives, what do you call it, Ajax. Is used to abrade the surface and to polish that surface, so that what you get is a fairly reflective surface, actually. And it seemingly is a surface which you can penetrate. And then after that, there is the sandwiching of that masonite in plastic or plexiglass. So what happens, you have a reflective surface that is contained by another reflective surface, and what you see continually is your own reflection.
That's right. Yeah.
There are a series of reflections there. The first reflection that you are most immediately aware of is your own reflection in the plastic that you confront. But there's also the reflection that is the back, or the flip side of that, which is the reflecting surface of the back side of the plexiglass against that reflective surface of the graphite. So that there are literally 3 reflective surfaces acting there, each reflection connecting with another and making a specific kind of relationship to another. Hence the title, Middle Space. There is a reflection there which you really cannot respond to, because it's the reflection that the material responds to as a result of the plastic being in front of it. But it opens up this whole idea of things, in some cases, being abstractions, that there is really no such thing as black. There is only penetratable conditions, that's all.
Well, I think it's a phenomenon that most people are familiar with, which is going into a gallery and having to deal with plexiglass or glass and seeing your own reflection, and usually that's not an intentional thing.
Yeah.
And so with this piece, it plays on that experience a little
Interesting.
bit.
I should give you a little background to that particular piece of work. Someone asked me if I was ever going to do representational work again, and I couldn't forthrightly tell them I'm still doing representational work. So I chose to do a piece of work at that time which would allow them to understand that condition of representation and also the condition of illusion as having the base of reality, so that when you come in to see the work, you always see a reflection. That reflection is an illusion, and all of it's bound up in this whole concept of representation anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so that wherever you try to go around that work, it always reflects something in front of it. So you're always seeing an illusion, a reflection, but you're always seeing reality at the same time.
Okay, I think the last question that I would like to ask you about is the catalog. We could go back to that. It was done not just as a handbook to this exhibition. I know that you have expectations for the catalog.
Yes.
It's a very special kind of coming together of artist statements, and also that none of the artists knew what each other was submitting for the catalog.
That's true.
Maybe you could...
Okay, I wanted to try and see if I could make the catalog something that people would be interested in and something that they would get some value from, rather than just being a catalog which you used perhaps at the exhibition and perhaps not, and probably put on a shelf once the exhibition was over. To that end, I've tried to solicit statements from the artists or gather statements from the artists in one way or another, at the same time helping to try and reveal certain things through the artist statement by the way that the material is typographed or typeset. Right. Neither of the artists knew what the other artists were writing. They really had no way of being able to say, well, okay, I'll approach it this way because this is the way I should approach it for this show or this situation. They each wrote honestly and intentionally with their own concerns. And when collecting those things, I found that it revealed the same thing as the work had revealed, that they have some of the same very real concerns, and that they approach it in slightly different ways, but upon reading the material, you found that there was something that was really a kind of knitting together of all of the works and all of the people that were involved in the exhibition. I suspect if my intention is met with the catalog, people will want the catalog. They will want to use it while they're here at the exhibition, and they will want to enjoy it after they leave. It's really taking away a piece of work,
Yes.
actually. And there's been a lot of time spent in putting together the catalog, providing photographs for it, and trying to deal with the work in an honest and truthful way. Each artist has 2 works represented in the catalog, and at least 1 statement, which helps to deal with the kind of concerns that they're involved with, and helps to allow people to explore their work, probably more honestly. Yeah.
Well, I think that we're almost out of time, as they say, but
Okay.
I'd like to say that I think the show looks great, and I want to thank you for pulling it all together for us.
Great. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
The 5th Dalhousie Drawing Exhibition at the Dalhousie Art Gallery continues through May the 4th. Now let's look at what's going on at the other galleries around Halifax. At the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, in the main gallery, there are fiber sculptures by Charlotte Lindgren through June the 2nd. In the second floor gallery, aspects of the permanent collection also through June the 2nd. Mount St. Vincent Art Gallery will show the Biennale of New Quebec Tapestry downstairs, while the portrait sculptures of Doris Judah will be in the upstairs gallery, both through May the 18th. The St. Mary's Art Gallery will have a show of work by William Kurilek, A Prairie Boy's Summer, through May 21st. At the Center for Art Tapes, Dara Birnbaum will be showing videotapes through April 25th. At Anna Leonowen's Gallery, at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, the Masters of Fine Arts students will be exhibiting their graduate work. That will be through April the 24th. We welcome your comments on the program. Please send them to Gallery News and Reviews, care of the Dalhousie Art Gallery, Dalhousie University, Halifax, Nova Scotia, or if you prefer, phone 424-2403. Next week, our series will feature a program about the Eye Level Gallery, their Art Journal article, and their current drawing show. We hope you'll join us then. Thank you for watching.